Live coverage of Inauguration 97. With Cokie Roberts, Sam Donaldson, Jeff Greenfield, Michelle McQueen, John Donvan, and analysis and comment from George Will and George Stephanopoulos. Now reporting from Capitol Hill, Peter Jennings.
Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our coverage of Inauguration 1997. Isn't that a wonderful photograph? That's from the top of Arlington National Cemetery across the Potomac, looking at the Capitol and Washington. That camera can see about 6 miles, and there's Pennsylvania Avenue, where people have been gathering already for a couple of hours. It is not as cold in Washington as people had anticipated it might be. It's up there in the mid-30s now, but the enthusiasm in the Capitol is already very high. People have come from around the country to join us here today. We are very warmly ensconced here on top of the Labor Department building overlooking Pennsylvania Avenue. And we have correspondents all over the city today and cameras all over the city to enable you, wherever you are in the country, to participate in this inauguration of the 42nd president, the 53rd inauguration. We have had, not all of them, of course, in the nation's capital, but now it's a great big deal here. And there is the White House as we wait for the president, who, with Mrs. Clinton and his daughter Chelsea, has been at church this morning. A very invigorating church service this morning, which went on for some time, which the president seemed to enjoy, with representatives of all the faiths, again, from the country. And there's the west side of the Capitol, with the various U.S. flags hanging on the west facade. This side of the Capitol used since Ronald Reagan, quite frankly, because it's just better looking than the east side, and there's a great vista for people to enjoy as they look west along the mall towards the Lincoln Memorial. So welcome. I hope you'll stay with us for the next couple of hours at least, as the president goes to Capitol Hill to take the oath of office, to give this all-important inaugural speech. By the way, though, you may have seen these over the weekend. Those white tents on the mall are where people in unusually large number for a very cold weekend gathered to partake of a variety of foods, to look at the technology of the 21st century, favorite phrase of President Clinton's, of course, and to hear musically and artistically, in song and in voice, all sorts of emotions about the country as we gather together here for this last inauguration of this century. We're going to quickly move up and down Pennsylvania Avenue, the Capitol, now to introduce to you, with their opening thoughts of the day, our various correspondents and other participants, going first to the White House to John Donvan. Good morning, John.
And literally any second now they should step out through the North Portico and get into their limousines and make the trip to the Capitol. And I would say that the feeling here is really quite a nice feeling. It's a little bit almost like Christmas, with the sense of anticipation. There, I don't know if you can hear it, there's literally choir music in the background coming off of Pennsylvania Avenue, and a sense that there's going to be something unwrapped today, and that would be the inaugural address. All we know for sure about it is that it's going to be an address about ideas, not quite the feeling of triumph of last time, in what I would say is President Clinton's attempt to make this, more than anything, the thinking man's inauguration.
Okay, John, thanks very much. We'll come back to you often as the day goes on, of course. A lot of pressure on the president about this inaugural speech, and we'll get to that a little later on. But out there on Pennsylvania Avenue, about 8th and Pennsylvania Avenue at the Navy Memorial, is ABC's Lisa Stark. Lisa, you said to me earlier, people have been gathering since early morning.
Good morning. A band playing off to my left. Folks here waiting along Pennsylvania Avenue. Some of them out here over an hour and a half earlier. The people have been out here more than an hour, almost 2 hours, waiting for the president to go by, and then the parade later today. It is a bit chilly out here, as you can imagine, but they're taking it in good spirits. Many have come from all over the country to be part of this part of history, as they say.
Well,
Peter, back to you.
Nice to have you with us, Lisa. Maybe walk away from the band a little bit. Now, as we work our way up towards the Capitol, on the west front lawn, just beyond the Capitol reflecting pool there, you can see the crowd that's already beginning to gather, and our Michelle McQueen is down there. Good morning, Michelle.
Good morning, Peter. Peter, you can see that people are starting to make their way to their seats, but what you can't see behind us is a whole sea of human beings, many of whom have come out very early in the morning to get good standing room seats. And we've found people from as far away as Hawaii, California, and Texas. Some very unusual weather for them. And the word we keep hearing here is pride. people are very proud of the fact that the country is at peace. We seem to be doing well economically, and even though a lot of the people here didn't necessarily support the president and aren't even active in politics, they're very proud of their country right now, and they said that they wanted to come out here just to be a part of today.
Okay, Michelle, thanks very much. Working our way up onto the west side of the Capitol, ABC's Jeff Greenfield, who's been working out in California of late, has graciously agreed to come and freeze for a day. Morning, Jeff.
Good morning, Peter. I guess for you Canadians, this is summer. It's very interesting, Peter. If you go up to the podium, you see the senators and congressmen almost like little school kids. They're taking pictures of each other at the podium where many of them would like to be someday. Among the Clinton people I have talked to this weekend, it's a much more subdued atmosphere than 4 years ago. They were conquerors 4 years ago, filled with the most, sometimes extreme expectations of what they were going to do. The Democrats flocked to Washington after 12 years in the wilderness. Now they're celebrating the fact that they've retained power, but many of them sort of are much more realistic about what they can and can't do. So they're happy, but it's very different, I think, than it was in 1993. Peter?
Couldn't agree more, Jeff, as you're the keeper of the official ABC thermometer. Can we have a look at Jeff again, who's got the official thermometer feed, what, 35 degrees now?
Oh, it's at almost 36, Peter.
Yeah. Getting warmer, getting warmer. It was freezing here over the weekend, but it is getting much warmer today. And while the sun is not out at the moment, it's approaching balmy. On the podium itself, ABC's Sam Donaldson. Good morning, Sam.
Good morning, Peter. I mean, what are these wimps saying it's cold? I mean, it's very warm up here. You know, I must tell you, the atmosphere up here, there are a lot of Republicans here, members of the Senate and the House, and as well as, of course, the predominant Democrats watching their president sworn in again from their party. But there's a really goodwill atmosphere up here. People shaking hands, clapping each other on the back. I mean, it's just like old home week.
Okay, Sam, thanks. We'll come back to you often as the day goes along. I want to go inside of the Capitol Rotunda. The only other person besides me who gets to be warm, ABC's Cokie Roberts. Morning, Cokie.
They do have the doors open, Peter, to make it a little bit chilly here, but nothing like the outside. Here, the atmosphere that everyone else has talked about, you really have that sense that what we're celebrating here is the democracy. That the turnover of power is not happening this time from one party to another, but that you still have one party here in the Capitol, one party occupying the White House. And this is a day of great hope. All the bunting and the flags and the beautiful scenery of Washington just makes everybody feel good about this government and about the Constitution, which actually has in it the words of the president's oath, which we will hear today.
Exactly, Cokie. Thanks. Come back to you, of course, as the president makes his way through the rotunda. I think when there's the west side of the facade with those rather interesting, if you look closely at those American flags on the west side of the facade, you will see that they're not all the most familiar flag. You see there on the left is the 13 stars for the original 13 colonies. There's also one, if you get time throughout the day to count, 25 stars. Took us a while here to figure that out. In fact, Arkansas was the 25th state to join the Union. And there's one there with 35 stars as well. So you get, as Cokie hints there, the same kind of bunting flavor that has always been associated ever since they came to Washington. The president, Mrs. Clinton, and Chelsea leaving the White House now, and the official committee of the Congress, which will convey the president to Capitol Hill. It's called the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies. It has 3 senators on it and 3 members of the House. Certainly the Speaker is going to be there, Senator John Warner on the left, the ranking Republican, Senator from Virginia, who's on the committee. They will all travel together in a variety of cars up Pennsylvania Avenue. And included in their number, who we'll hear from as we go along, we're delighted to say, is ABC's Barbara Walters, who is Senator Warner's guest today, and who has hinted that she may stop on the way. Once a reporter, always a reporter. The Speaker will be in a car with the president, in the first car with Senator Warner, and Senator Wendell Ford, the Democrat of Kentucky, who is the ranking Democrat, who's done this many times before and who can be seen on the west front of the Capitol for days preparing for this inauguration to make sure that everything looks right. The second car will have the vice president in it, Senator Lott, Republican leader in the House, Senator Daschle, the Democratic leader in the House. I'm joined also, just to introduce them while we continue to look at the White House, by two other guests who I haven't had a chance to welcome this morning. Our political director, Hal Bruno. Good morning, Hal, who's with us. And the presidential historian, former chairman of the history department at Columbia University, Henry Graff. Henry, third inauguration. Nice to have you here.
Nice to be here again, Peter.
Do they ever record, Henry, what they talk about on the trip up to the Capitol?
We know a lot about that. We know that when Woodrow Wilson was inaugurated in 1913, William Howard talked about how much money he had saved out of his presidential salary, and he urged Wilson, who was parsimonious, to do the same. And we know that. We know that when Roosevelt and Hoover rode to the Capitol, Roosevelt got no words at all out of Hoover, and finally he said, talking about some of the new buildings which were under construction along Pennsylvania Avenue, nice steel, isn't it?
Thank you. We're going to come back in just a moment as this motorcade gets underway along Pennsylvania Avenue to introduce you, of course, to the two Georges who are with us, George Will and George Stephanopoulos. We'll be right back.
ABC News coverage of Inauguration 97. Brought to you by Dexatrim and Chrysler and the cab-forward sedans of Chrysler. ABC News coverage will continue in a moment.
What happens when you don't just make something?
ABC News live coverage of Inauguration 97 continues. Once again, Peter Jennings.
Welcome back to our inaugural coverage. Pennsylvania Avenue, the presidential motorcade has just left the White House. The president in the first car being accompanied, really being escorted by the Joint Congressional Committee on Inaugural Ceremonies. It's a mouthful, but it's tradition. And this day is all about tradition. It is all about bipartisanship. There'll be lots of time and lots of fodder when they all get back to politics tomorrow. But this is very much the Capitol at the moment, which feels enthusiasm about the country and about all the connotations of the political system, and less about the politics today, though you are bound to hear some of it discussed. All of them now, of course, in closed cars. You may remember from inauguration past one or two, this was the car that was fitted out with a microphone so the president could talk to people if he were so inclined along the way. They are, of course, all bulletproof now. Secret Service ruled long ago that presidents would no longer travel in open cars. There isn't even a convertible to be found anywhere in the federal fleet. Warren Harding, 1921, the first even to use a car to go to his inauguration. And now these presidential motorcades, as many of us have experienced during political campaigns, have enough vehicles in them to tie up most major metropolises if the president, or for that matter the vice president, comes to town. Just to give you a clue, as you're looking at this motorcade, you've got the Republican and Democratic senators who are accompanying the president. The Speaker of House is with him. Mrs. Clinton is there with the Democratic leader of the House, and of course Chelsea, widely regarded in this town, and perhaps I think in the country at the moment, as an immensely sophisticated and tolerant young woman, given all of the attention that has been paid to her. Vice President, of course, is here. Mrs. Gore, the Gore family is all in this motorcade as well, and they will be there in just a few minutes. And as I said, while most of us are fairly warm and comfortable here, outside it's fairly balmy by Washington standards over the last several days. People are dressed for it. There's a considerable crowd and getting larger on the west side of the Capitol as the president is on his way. To introduce our two Georges this morning with some opening thoughts perhaps on the day, George Will. Good morning, George.
Good morning, Peter. It's always fun to watch a republic, which is of course committed to simplicity and egalitarianism, try to evolve a civic liturgy suitable for an occasion like this, so where other nations may have serried ranks of bishops and lots of ermine and silk, we have gray worsted and red neckties. But the real symbolism is generated by our Constitution, and it's really implicit in the drive you're watching. The president comes to Congress, not the other way around. Congress is, of course, Article 1 of the Constitution. It is sitting symbolically where the four quadrants of the federal city meet, and the drama of the day and the drama of the next 4 years intersect here as to how the two branches, the two ends of Pennsylvania Avenue, will get along.
Nice to have you with us, George, and of course it's nice to welcome George Stephanopoulos, newest commentator of ABC. Good morning, George Stephanopoulos.
Peter, good morning. And it's a very different Congress that the President is going to this morning. 4 years ago, when he was riding up to the Capitol, he had a Democratic majority in the House and a Democratic majority in the Senate. Now he's got Republican majorities that he must work with in both, and he's going to be focusing on that in his speech today.
I think most people in the country know that George Stephanopoulos has worked for President Clinton for the last 4 years. What were you doing 4 years ago?
I was just thinking about that. I'm getting very nostalgic. Actually, I was sitting up in the Speaker's office with the President's speech, and it turned out I was in the wrong office. So about 5 minutes to noon, I was running through the Capitol trying to give it to him at the last minute.
Now, we hope you won't be as rushed with us this time, George Stephanopoulos. Nice to have you. And without too much ado, and taking not very long at all to make it from one end of Pennsylvania to the avenue to the other, the President has now arrived on the north side. We're on the east side of the Capitol here, but on the north side of the east side, outside the Law Library entrance there, and ABC's John Cochran is there. Good morning, John.
Good morning, Peter, and here he is.
Much enthusiasm up there, John,
we'll try to
today?
shout a question to him. There's always the decoy car, you know. We never know which one is going to be the President's car.
What's the security like up there this morning, John? John Cochran, what's the security like up there this morning? As heavy as usual?
It is very tight. Very difficult to get onto this east front of the Capitol, Peter. And a lot of people who thought they had passes that would enable them to walk where I am now were turned away because they arrived a little too late.
One of the things we have heard this morning from our own news bureau is that security is generally tighter throughout the city today because several news bureaus, our own included, had faxes in the last day or so from someone alleging to be a member of an anti-abortion group who raised the possibility of demonstrations and or violence on this day. And so security, which is always extraordinarily tight here, Senator Ford of Kentucky, Wendell Ford, one of the co-chairmen of
Mr.
the
President?
Joint Congressional Committee.
Mr. President?
Senator Warner there with him as well, the Republican, the ranking Republican member of the committee.
Mr. President?
They are going to go
Is it more fun this time?
Nice try, John. Thank you very much. Another modern tradition was not always thus. The presidents came by of trying to get the president's attention. Henry Graff, we always are his resident historian here. They go to the Law Library entrance. The Law Library, in terms of the Congress, is what?
It's not the main entrance. It's the entrance where the legislators enter.
Right, but the Law Library is the specific library of law for the Congress itself.
That's right.
This is what it's going to look like through the crypt, which was, of course, originally designed for George Washington to lie in. If he didn't, ultimately went to Mount Vernon. But they'll come through the rotunda, where we hope to talk briefly to Barbara Walters about what they chatted about, at least in her vehicle, on her way up to the Capitol. So as we get these people inside the Law Library entrance, we'll go away for a brief message and come back very quickly.
ABC News live coverage of Inauguration 97 will continue in a moment.
Good morning and welcome back to our inaugural coverage. That's Barbara Walters. Barbara, it's your microphone. You've been in the procession. Tell us what you know.
Well, I had a chance to talk to both the President and Mrs. Clinton. The President, both of them extremely relaxed. The President said his speech is going to be about 15 minutes long, although he's allowed 40 minutes so he can talk slowly. He says he's practically memorized it. He wrote it 12 times, he said, at least. So he said, if it's good, it's because of me, and if it's bad, it's because of me. I've never, well, I don't get to the White House very often, but, you know, it was such a casual, easy time for him. He walked around talking to the senators and the congressmen. Vernon Jordan, his friend, was there. Leon Panetta was there, probably last day in the White House. Mrs. Clinton said that it was so different from 4 years ago, Peter. 4 years ago, she said she was very confused. She didn't know what was going to happen. Today, she said, look, I'm all moved in. My clothes are in place, and I can relax and enjoy it.
Help me with the woman's question, by the way. I don't quite know what color to call her outfit.
Let's see. Peach, coral.
Right.
And Chelsea was wearing what I would call dove gray, okay?
And no hat, right?
I didn't see a hat then, but Mrs. Clinton has a matching coat, so she may very well have a hat. I just want to know if you would ask these questions of Sam Donaldson.
No, I wouldn't, because Sam wouldn't know how to answer them as adroitly
right.
as you do. Now, you came in the second car. What was it like?
I was in the motorcade. I was not in the car with the president. Everybody was very nervous because the president was 20 minutes late. The church service, which I hear was very moving, was also quite long. They may have to cut certain aspects of the actual ceremony. There's a band that they've got sort of eight minutes leeway, they were saying. And you know, the president must constitutionally be sworn in at exactly 12 noon. The president also said, Peter, that his speech 4 years ago was the second shortest. He talked about George Washington and said Washington just said, you know, it's 90 seconds. Here I am. If you don't like what I'm doing, you can get rid of me. His speech is going to have a historical theme, he said. He's going to talk about what this means, this inauguration, in the time of this period, you know, getting into the next century, and then he will go on from there.
Okay, Barbara, thanks very much. That's wonderful. Okay. Barbara Walters is a guest of Senator Warner today, and so she's now going to go out and sit on the podium with everybody else and enjoy the inauguration in a way that Barbara hasn't done before, because she worked with us, of course, 4 years and 8 years ago. The President, by the way, like everybody else, is going to wear business attire and concentrate on his clothes for just a second. John Kennedy was the last president to wear really formal wear, including a silk top hat, to his inauguration. Sam Donaldson, the news of the podium at the moment?
Well, simply that everybody is now ready for the action, Peter. The glad handing I was talking about earlier today goes on. I really have been up here, you know, for a number of these, but I have not seen the convivial atmosphere that I've seen today. I suppose that this bodes well for Mr. Clinton's second term. At least the Republicans I've talked to up here said they're going to cooperate. Yes, we're going to fix Medicare, and yes, we're going to help balance the budget. Of course, on a day like this, I suppose that's what you'd expect them to say, but it's still a good feeling, and it's a good thing to hear.
Our political director, Hal Bruno, is with us here, and as we continue to focus on the Capitol itself, Hal, question about the speech, and we'll have many of them. It can't be a political speech. It has to be a national speech.
Oh, it's got to be a speech that's meant to bring everybody together, and especially it's a speech that's going to be aimed at the members of the Congress, and especially at the Republican members of Congress, because those are the people he has to work with.
And of course, this is also Martin Luther King Day. This is the first time that Inauguration Day has fallen on Martin Luther King Day. Dr. King would have been 68 years old today, and that raises its own level of interest about the inauguration and the conjunction with Martin Luther King Day. There are various meetings of reconciliation and unity and encounters being held around the country to focus on Martin Luther King's legacy as well as on the constitutional aspects of the inauguration. Henry Graff, our historian, explained to everybody again, they may have heard it up until now, how do we get to January the 20th rather than March as it used to be?
The constitutional amendment, which is the 20th, which moved the inauguration date from March 4th to January 20th, was ratified in 1933. And it is said that in the discussion of what date it ought to be, the House held for January 19th, the Senate for January 21st, and in the conference committee, they chose the 20th, not as a compromise, but because they consulted the records of the Washington Weather Bureau, and they found that the 20th gave the very best weather historically, and of course, the first time the 20th came up as a presidential inauguration day in 1937, it rained biblically.
Worst rainstorm I think they'd had in Washington in 100 years or something on that particular day. But why, explain why it moved from March until January, because do I understand correctly they didn't want to have a lame duck president as long as March and wanted the presidency to change more quickly?
Yeah, and they didn't want the new president coming in with a lame duck Congress, which they also changed in connection with the 20th Amendment, so that the president now comes in with Congress already seated and, as it were, with its weapons trained on the White House. Remember, Lincoln became president and started the Civil War, as it were, without Congress being around. That's no longer possible with an incoming president.
And of course, the travel time to Washington has improved. In the old days, it used to take a considerable length of time to get from the outlying parts of the country, first to New York and then to Pennsylvania and subsequently to Washington. And now people get here and show up as well dressed as Senator Connie Mack of Florida. That is there. We've decided, looking around so far this morning, that he is wearing at least the most elegant hat among members of the Senate, and they have showed up in all sorts of headgear in anticipation. Senator Thurmond, who has seen more inauguration ceremonies than any other member of the Senate. Just to give you some clue as to what will happen and what everybody's waiting for. The President's own, the Reverend Billy Graham, of course, who's going to deliver the invocation, has done it for 8 presidents over the past 40 years. He has not been well of late, as many of you know, throughout the country. President Eisenhower, of course, 1953, 1965. He was there for Lyndon Johnson, Richard Nixon in 1969, 1985. This is a man so profoundly involved with the spiritual connections to the White House, and of course holds the largest evangelical meetings of any other pastor in the nation. Senator Moynihan of New York, on the left there, Senator Dodd, Senator Joe Biden on the right. Senator Dodd, by the way, is there in a beret, and there is Chelsea, who gets, defer to Cokie Roberts on this, because Cokie, you've watched this so much more closely than the rest of us. She just gets wonderfully high marks from everybody, doesn't she?
Chelsea Clinton, you're talking about
yes.
here. I think that the way that the family has handled her young femalehood in Washington has been quite remarkable. She participates when it's appropriate and when she will get some sense of history out of it, as with traveling with her mother to the Far East and to Europe. But then she also leads a normal teenage private life, which is really hard to do. And a lot of people who have been in the White House before have talked about, other presidential children who are now grown up have talked about how hard it was to do, and what a good job they do think the Clintons have done in this case.
She's 16 years old now. She'll be 17 on the
Just
27th
thriving.
of February. Senior in high school. She's already been looking at colleges throughout the fall, and we'll be off to college before long. The president, who, as I guess most people know, has been asked about all sorts of people staying in the White House, in the whole question of whether or not the White House has been available as a political favor, said the other day he was pleased to discover, when looking at the records, how often Chelsea, his daughter, had her friends over. And there is Mrs. Clinton with Marianne Gingrich, the Speaker's wife, coming out down. They go down through the crypt and out onto the west side of the White House. So Dr. Graham will conduct the invocation. We'll hear, of course, from the Marine Band, Vice President. There are any number of people here today from around the country to represent the political and cultural unity of the country. We'll either have something to say or something to sing. And of course, only for the 3rd time in inauguration history, there's going to be a poet who is going from Arkansas, who is going to recite a poem. And if there was anybody here who has a lot of pressure on him, Tipper Gore, the Vice President's wife, has had pressure on him, it will, I think, if we read it correctly, be the poet of the day. Brief glimpse of Senator Walter Mondale there on the podium as well. U.S. Ambassador to Japan, former Vice President. Clintons, Roger Clinton and child. Various members of the Clinton family, of course, are here.
Ladies and gentlemen, the First Lady, Hillary Rodham Clinton, accompanied by Elizabeth Green, Amelia Fields, Mrs. Ford, and Mrs. Gingrich.
That's Mrs. Gingrich to immediate left with the scarf on. President, coming through the crypt, if you've been in the Capitol and gone down the steps, you know this is where they'd originally designed a place to enshrine George Washington's body. It's got various scenes of Washington in it. And as you heard George Will refer earlier, the four quadrants of the city, it's the compass stone there in the crypt, which marks the 0 point from which the four corners of the city emanate.
The Vice President of the United States, the Honorable Albert Gore Jr., accompanied by John Chambers, Loretta Sims, June Berry, Senator Lott, Representative Gephardt, and Representative Army.
As those of you around the country probably have already heard in the last day or so, the President arrived at a time when the country thinks better of him than it has for some considerable period of time. He arrives with some of the highest polls in his presidency, and at least in the ABC News poll, in fact in most of the others. Former Speaker of the House, by the way, Tom Foley, just shaking hands with the white hair there on the right. General optimism in the country, specific concerns, of course, because everyone in the country is realistic about the state of the country, but general optimism about the economy and the President's opportunity to accomplish things in the next 4 years. And a real sense here in Washington today, at this bipartisan level to which people refer, that this is a starting over opportunity.
The President of the United States, the Honorable William Jefferson Clinton, accompanied by Susan McGill, Greg Casey, Bill Livingood, Senator Warner, Senator Ford, Speaker Gingrich, Senator Lott, Representative Gephardt, and Representative Army.
There's a good deal going to happen here this morning. We'll be right back.
This new car is powered by Dodge's 3.5.
Vice President Gore, Mrs. Gore, I'm going to ask that we all bow our heads in prayer. Our Father and our God, we thank you today for the privilege of coming into your presence on this historic and solemn occasion. We thank you for your gracious hand, which has preserved us as a nation. We praise you for the peaceful continuity of government that this inauguration represents. We recall that the Bible says, except the Lord build a house, they labor in vain that build it. You also said that to whom much has been given, much shall be required. We look gratefully to the past and thank you that from the very foundations of America, you granted our forefathers courage and wisdom as they trusted in you. So we ask today that you would inspire us by their example. Where there's been failure, forgive us. Where there's been progress, confirm. Where there's been success, give us humility and teach us to follow your instructions more closely as we enter the next century. Give to all those to whom you have entrusted leadership today a desire to seek your will and to do it. So today, we ask your blessing on President Clinton and his wife Hillary and their daughter Chelsea, and upon Vice President Gore and his wife Tipper and their children. Give to all our leaders the vision of what you desire America to become, and the wisdom to accomplish it, and the strength to cross the bridges into the 21st century. We pray also for the members of the House and the Senate, for the Supreme Court, and for all who bear responsibility of leadership in this nation, which is blessed with such ethnic diversity. We've not solved all the social problems of our time, such as drugs and racism. Technology and social engineering have not solved the basic problems of human greed, pride, intolerance, and selfishness. We need your insight. We need your compassion. We need your strength. As both President Clinton and Senator Dole urged us in the recent presidential campaign, may this be a time of coming together to help us deal with the problems we face. Oh Lord, help us to be reconciled first to you and secondly to each other. May Dr. Martin Luther King's dream finally come true for all of us. Help us to learn our courtesy to our fellow countrymen that comes from the one who taught us that whatever you want me to do to you, do also to them. Remind us today that you have shown us what is good and what you require of us, to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. We ask that as a people, we may humble ourselves before you and seek your will for our lives and for this great nation. Help us in our nation to work as never before, to strengthen our families, and to give our children hope and a moral foundation for the future. So may our desire be to serve you, and in so doing serve one another. This we pray in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Dr. Billy Graham, in every poll I think I've seen over the last 10 years, the most respected American. Senator Warner is now going to introduce a young Eagle Scout from Vienna, Virginia, who's going to recite the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now my privilege to present the children
We're
of
not
the
going to miss
Gospel
much of
Mass
this at
Choir
all, but we will be right back.
under the auspices of the Washington Performing Arts Society. More than 100 voices from the Washington
News live coverage of Inauguration 97 will continue after this from our ABC stations.
ABC Tuesday, the hardest working night of comedy.
To clarify for people, because we have had a couple of calls, this is, of course, the official birthday of Dr. Martin Luther King. He would have been 68 on the 15th of January, which was his real birthday, but this is the day we celebrate as a nation, and of course there have been very moving ceremonies in Atlanta today, as well as in many other cities around the country. Let's go back to the west side of the Capitol. Let's build a bridge all across America. A song sung by the Children of Gospel Mass Choir, all about putting aside differences. Somebody wrote yesterday all about forgetting O.J. Simpson and Rodney King and about living in harmony.
The Honorable Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who will administer the oath of office for the Vice President of the United States, Albert Gore, Jr. Madam Judge.
Justice Ginsburg going to swear in the Vice President. She's appointed to the court in 1993 by President Clinton. She's, and of course, the Vice President bringing forth his
If you are ready to take the
children
oath,
as well.
Mr. Vice President, please repeat after me. I, Albert Gore, Jr., do solemnly swear
I, Albert Gore, Jr., do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
and that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Every good wish, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you.
Very close family, of course, the Gore family, Corinna, Kristen, Sarah, and Albert, Vice President's kids. Vice President will not speak. Not that Vice President haven't. The last to speak was Spiro Agnew in 1969, but this Vice President is going to stay out of the way of his president. We'll be right back. This is Jesse Norman. Great American opera star Jessie Norman. Some people think it would be hard to have such an occasion without her, and of course millions of people think that America the Beautiful is the single most beautiful song about the country's virtues. Even the French couldn't have the 200th anniversary of their revolution back in the late 80s without Jessie Norman to sing.
Ladies and gentlemen, as chairman of the Joint Inaugural Committee, it is now my privilege to introduce my co-chairman, Senator Wendell Ford of Kentucky, who will introduce the Chief Justice of the United States. Senator Ford.
Thank you, my friend John Warner, President Clinton, Mrs. Clinton, Vice President Gore, Mrs. Gore, and my fellow Americans and my colleagues. Hillary Rodham Clinton, wife of the President-elect, will hold the Clinton family Bible. They are joined by their daughter, Chelsea. It is now my great privilege and high honor to present the Chief Justice of the United States Supreme Court, the Honorable William Hobbs Rehnquist, who will administer the oath of office to the President and the President-elect of the United States, William Jefferson Clinton.
This will be the third time for Justice Rehnquist. Did it for George Bush and President Clinton.
Take the oath, Mr. President. Will you raise your right hand and repeat after me? I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear.
I, William Jefferson Clinton, do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States
And will, to the best of my ability,
and will, to the best of my ability,
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Good luck.
We know it's a cliche, but here in Washington, in the nation's capital, the sun just came out.
Ladies and gentlemen, the President of the United States of America, William Jefferson Clinton.
Well, for many people, certainly in this capital, here's what it's all about. Been a lot of pressure about the speech. We will listen throughout.
my fellow citizens, at this last presidential inauguration of the 20th century, let us lift our eyes toward the challenges that await us in the next century. It is our great good fortune that time and chance have put us not only at the edge of a new century in a new millennium, but on the edge of a bright new prospect in human affairs. A moment that will define our course and our character for decades to come. We must keep our old democracy forever young. Guided by the ancient vision of a promised land, let us set our sights upon a land of new promise. The promise of America was born in the 18th century out of the bold conviction that we are all created equal. It was extended and preserved in the 19th century when our nation spread across the continent, saved the Union, and abolished the awful scourge of slavery. Then, in turmoil and triumph, that promise exploded onto the world stage to make this the American century. And what a century it has been. America became the world's mightiest industrial power, saved the world from tyranny in 2 world wars and a long Cold War, and time and again reached out across the globe to millions who, like us, long for the blessings of liberty. Along the way, Americans produced the great middle class and security in old age, built unrivaled centers of learning and open public schools to all, split the atom and explored the heavens, invented the computer and the microchip, and deepened the wellspring of justice by making a revolution in civil rights for African Americans and all minorities, and extending the circle of citizenship, opportunity, and dignity to women. Now, for the 3rd time, a new century is upon us, and another time to choose. We began the 19th century with a choice to spread our nation from coast to coast. We began the 20th century with a choice to harness the Industrial Revolution to our values of free enterprise, conservation, and human decency. Those choices made all the difference. At the dawn of the 21st century, a free people must now choose to shape the forces of the information age and the global society, to unleash the limitless potential of all our people, and yes, to form a more perfect union. When last we gathered, our march to this new future seemed less certain than it does today. We vowed then to set a clear course to renew our nation. In these 4 years, we have been touched by tragedy, exhilarated by challenge, strengthened by achievement. America stands alone as the world's indispensable nation. Once again, our economy is the strongest on earth. Once again, we are building stronger families, thriving communities, better educational opportunities, a cleaner environment. Problems that once seemed destined to deepen now bend to our efforts. Our streets are safer, and record numbers of our fellow citizens have moved from welfare to work. And once again, we have resolved for our time a great debate over the role of government. Today we can declare government is not the problem, and government is not the solution. We, the American people, we are the solution. Our founders understood that well and gave us a democracy strong enough to endure for centuries, flexible enough to face our common challenges and advance our common dreams in each new day. As times change, so government must change. We need a new government for a new century. Humble enough not to try to solve all our problems for us, but strong enough to give us the tools to solve our problems for ourselves. A government that is smaller, lives within its means, and does more with less. Yet where it can stand up for our values and interests around the world, and where it can give Americans the power to make a real difference in their everyday lives, government should do more, not less. The preeminent mission of our new government is to give all Americans an opportunity, not a guarantee, but a real opportunity to build better lives. Beyond that, my fellow citizens, the future is up to us. Our founders taught us that the preservation of our liberty and our union depends upon responsible citizenship. And we need a new sense of responsibility for a new century. There is work to do, work that government alone cannot do. Teaching children to read, hiring people off welfare rolls, coming out from behind locked doors and shuttered windows to help reclaim our streets from drugs and gangs and crime, taking time out of our own lives to serve others. Each and every one of us, in our own way, must assume personal responsibility, not only for ourselves and our families, but for our neighbors and our nation.